Om. Sahana vavatu sahanau bhunaktu sah veeryam karvavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada Karpanya Doshopahata Swabhavaha Prechami Tvam Dharma Samudrichetaha Yashreyasya Nishchitam Pruhitan Me Shishyasteham Shadima Tvam Prapannam. Om Vangme Manasi Pratishthita Mano Me Vachi Pratishthhitam Avirmaedhi Vedasya Mahanisthaha Shrutam Me Ma Prahasihi Anena Adhitena Ahoratran Sandadhami Pritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanma Vavatu Tadvaktaram Avatu Avatu Mam Avatu Bhaktaram Avatu Bhaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Bhadram Karnevi Shunayam Devaha Bhadram Pashyema Akshbhirjatraha Sthirair Ange Stushkavagvam Sastanyubhihi Vyashema Deva Hitam Yadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vridhashavaha Swasti na Saksha Vishwavedaha Swasti na Saksho Arishtanemi Swasti no Brihaspatir Dadhatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aham Vrikshasya Reriva Kirti Prishtam Gireriva Urdhva Pavitro Vajaniva Swamritam Asmi Dravidagvam Savarchasam Sumedha Amritokshitaha Iti Trishankor Vedanuvachanam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayan Narayan. Okay.
Narayan.
So in the last class, we'll finish chapter 13 today. In the last class, essentially what we understood was that as we differentiate between the kshetra and the kshetragya, between the field and the farmer, the insentient nature and the consciousness, we, oh wow, it's fallen off. We understood that all actions in the nature are done by all actions are done by nature, the insentient nature, and the actions are basically a result of the interaction between the three gunas, right? That's what we saw in 29. All actions are done by nature alone as a result of the interactions of the three gunas. How that happens is a subject of the next chapter. So we'll understand how the three gunas interact, what they are, how they impact us. And the Lord also told us that the one who understands this fact, because you see, all of us are constantly in the space of what we said, that there is a hierarchy, right? Sabse upar is the bhav with which we do something. Next comes the emotions with the, sorry, first is the purpose. What is the purpose of all actions, right? That's the top end. Then comes the bhav with which we do those actions. Then comes the action itself, and then comes the result of the action, right? Padarth of the action. So हम लोग क्या करते हैं in generally, because we are constantly in a space of body consciousness, we are always operating at the level of action and results, operating at the level of actions and results, right? Actions and their result, Bhagwan Ji is now telling us, is squarely in the space of nature alone. It is a factor of the field alone, not the farmer. Okay? Being able to understand that is very important, because that allows us to see why in Gita there is a constant reminder to not get attached to actions or the results, not create judgments based on actions and their results, and that we must go 2 levels higher and only focus on the purpose. Remember, in the first 6 chapters during the Karma Yoga chapters, we constantly told ourselves that we have to focus on the purpose. Purpose comes first, Bhav comes second, and that's it. Focus on these two. After that, whatever actions happen, they will not accrue any results to us. They will not, हम उसमें लिप्त नहीं होंगे. We won't get attached by them, or we won't get attached to the results, and none of the fruits will bear to us. And now we understand why. Because actions and their results are squarely in the space of field alone. The farmer is associated with the purpose, which is where we need to operate. And then Bhagwanji also tells us that there is complete non-involvement of the self in all these actions. Self only provides power. Within that power, within that light of the sun, all actions happen. But the self is unaffected by those actions. And this is important for us to understand, because if to take it back to our me story, how that affects us is that whatever actions are being done by me, whatever thoughts, whatever feelings happen, they happen squarely in the space of this field alone. The self inside of me, who I really am, my own self, the capital S self, is unsullied, untouched by the actions that this body, mind, intellect complex has done in the past or now. If there is anger, that anger is a property of this BMI complex of Tuhina that is there right now. Tuhina, the self, is not angry. That Tuhina is unsullied. That self. In fact, Tuhina itself is a identity given to this ego that is associated with BMI complex. Right? I am not Tuhina. In this moment, in this life, this garb of Tuhina with this BMI complex has been taken on for this journey. Right? So self is completely unsullied by this. Now he's going to give us an example, right? So in 32, he gave us the example that of like how to understand the fact that there is no real union of field and the farmer. They are completely separate. The farmer gives the energy to the field for the field to bear fruit, to germinate, to create, but there is no actual union. All union When I say that when I associate myself as a farmer, I associate myself with this body, mind, intellect complex, and then associate myself with the suffering or the pleasure that comes from being associated with this BMI complex. That is only assumed. That relationship is not real. I am not this BMI, but yet I suffer. Why do I suffer? I suffer because of this apparent mana hua relationship, mani hui satta. So assumed relationship. That union is not real. And then he gave us an example of the space. And in the next shloka, he'll give us the example of sun, which we all have understood really well.
So I'll give you another example, right? And that example is, firstly, can you guys hear us clearly? So the other example is electricity, right? Electricity runs through the house, and the various appliances use electricity for different functions. Whether it's the mixer, whether it's air conditioning, whether it's fan, whether it's a kettle that is boiling, whether it's microwave, right? All of these appliances are using electricity. The electricity itself remains unaffected with the activity that happens with these appliances. It is just powering these appliances. It remains unaffected with what is being created out of these appliances, right? And all of these appliances, instead of knowing that their true energy comes from the electricity, start focusing just on their appliance. That the mixer is more important than the microwave. I am more important than the vacuum cleaner. Fan is better than the table light, right? That's just a very simple way to understand how his self manifests in many, many different forms. And we get focused on the different forms and the identity of it rather than knowing that we are the capital S self, which remains completely unaffected with what we do in our form.
Now we'll start with Shloka 33. Kavita, you will read with us?
So once again, Tuhina. So the self which remains unaffected is the universal self or the individualized self?
They are one and the same.
Same.
So
it's like the same as wave of a water is no different from the ocean. A wave in the ocean, it takes a certain form, but it is not different. You will not say that this wave it has a distinct identity from the ocean, right? It's just one manifestation of the ocean because there was a breeze that was flowing. If there is no breeze, there is no wave. If there is breeze, you will see ripples, you will see eddies, you will see large waves, small waves, right? But will you ever say that this wave is separate identity from ocean? When you will talk about properties of ocean, would you say that this particular wave has a different property from the ocean?
So what's the difference then? There's no difference.
There is no difference.
That's why they say, God is within all of us. God, like a very famous English phrase, God lies within you. It's just that you've forgotten. Because we've attached ourselves to this bodily consciousness instead of our divine consciousness. In fact, in this last shloka, 34, when I was preparing, it reminded me of you, Bhageshri, because a lot of the times you've asked this question, which will get answered in 34.
Okay.
Moksha, what is self-realization? It is answered in 34.
Okay.
Kavita.
Explaining the function of the spirit in the body, the Lord says,
Yatha prakashyat ekah
Yata prakashayat ekah
kritsnam lokam imam ravihi.
Krishnam lokamimam ravihi.
We'll do this one more time. Huh? Yatha prakashayati ekah
Yata prakashayat ekah
kritsnam lokam imam ravihi.
Krishnam lokam imam ravihi.
Kshetram kshetri tatha kritsnam
Kshetram Kshetri Tatha Krishnam
Prakashayati Bharata.
Prakashayati Bharata. O Bharata, just as the one sun illuminates the whole universe, in the same manner, the one spirit illumines the entire field. Illumination of the field by the spirit. In this striking example, the Lord compares the spirit with the sun. The sun is situated millions of kilometers from the entire range of planets revolving around it. But it illuminates the entire universe, and all the activities of the world take place in its light. Even then, it does not get involved with those activities. In a like manner, the self endows the entire field of beings and objects with its energy, by which all of them get energized into diverse function. The self, however, remains totally uninvolved in those activities.
I think this example we have looked at enough number of times. The only thing I would say is that, see, sun's quality is light. When we say sun's quality is light, means sun's dharma is light. That's the context within which the word dharma is used all through Gita, right? What is your dharma? Sun's dharma is to give light and warmth. And sun does not have to acquire that quality from outside. Okay, it is its inherent quality. It does not go out and acquire light from outside. Unlike moon, moon's quality is not light. Moon's quality of light that you see is acquired from sun. It is acquired from outside, right? And then moon only reflects the light that comes to it from the sun. Moon's inherent quality is is actually shitalta. It provides shitalta. That shitalta it does not acquire from sun, right? Shitalta means being able to provide coolness in the most very like gross way to say it, right? Shitalta has a much deeper meaning than just being cool, right? So sun's quality is warmth and light. It does not acquire from outside. But anything and everybody that comes in its contact, in its range of this thing, sun provides that warmth and light to it in a non-judgmental manner. Inherently, it is constantly giving it, right? Anything that comes in contact with sun becomes illumined with that light, becomes warm with the warmth it provides.
And that's very similar to us. We have
Similar
to
to self.
show up. We have to show up to do our dharma without being attached to the consequences. We have to show up to do our duty just like the sun and not be attached to the consequences, not be attached to what is being created as part of it, right? And how do you do that? By focusing on the bhav of your action. The action will stay the same. You just need to focus on the bhav of lok sangra, seva, when you do the particular action. The bhav with which you do an action shapes the consequences you experience after. Karma is created not by the actual act of hitting someone and then them hitting you back. Karma is accrued by the thought of hitting someone. And then if you're nice to them and sweet to them and you serve them, but in your mind you're like, I can't wait for them to leave, I don't like them, blah, 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 blah. Bas, that's enough for you to shape your consequences of karma. Right? So it's not just the act we focus on, it has to be the bhav with which you do the act.
Purpose and bhav.
Purpose and bhav. And let's be honest, bhav is literally the only choice we have. Action, hoga, nahi hoga. Okay, that we'll know, gunas take care of it, one way or the other. But the only real choice we have is the bhav with which we do any action.
Bhagishi, will read the Shlok 34.
Yes. The Lord concludes by pointing out the gains accruing from this realization.
क्षेत्र क्षेत्रज्ञयोः एवम्
Kshetra Kshetrayo Evam.
क्षेत्र क्षेत्रज्ञयोः एवम्
Kshetra Kshetrayo Evam.
अन्तरं ज्ञानचक्षुषा
Antaram Jnana Chakshusa.
भूतप्रकृतिं मोक्षं भूतप्रकृतिमोक्षं च
Bhuta Prakriti Moksham Cha.
ये विदु यान्ति ते परम्
Ye Viduryanti Te Param. Those who thus realize with the eye of true perception the difference between the field and the farmer, and also realize liberation from nature along with the physical forms which evolve from it, attain the supreme reality. Attainment of the supreme reality. In shlokas 7 to 11 of this chapter, the means of true perception have been recounted as being the elements of true perception. By imbibing them, a capability is earned for realizing the distinction between the field or nature with the physical forms which evolve from it and its modifications on the one hand, and the farmer or the individualized self on the other. Realization of this distinction leads to the unshakable comprehension that all actions fall in the domain of insentient nature. It also becomes clear that they are the outcome of the interaction between the three gunas of nature and that the individualized self is completely uninvolved in them. This realization results in the attainment of the Supreme Self, and the delusion due to ignorance is annihilated forever. Such an aspirant becomes immortal.
So here, what does ignorance refer to? Ignorance essentially refers to the attachment to body and bodily relationship. That's the ignorance that we need to get rid of. And what were the means of perception? 7 to 11. These were the qualities that we studied: the humility, the unpretentiousness, the non-injury, forgiveness, self-control, purity, absence of ego, equanimity, absence of pleasure, aversion to worldly and worldly people. You remember this, right? 7 to 11, if you quickly read through, you will recall these qualities. So what is Bhagwanji trying to tell us? Focus on these qualities within you, and you will realize who you really are. We focus so much on the action and its result and are so pleased with the little change we make in ourselves. We see a good result, we're like, this was a really good thing I did. And that's it, you stop working on it. Each time we make a change, and this we've experienced everywhere, each time we make a little bit of change, put a little bit of effort, experience some result, and then we plateau. We're like, I'm doing very well, right? But at the same time, what Bhagwanji is saying, you have to keep focusing on these means of perception, working on them. When they become clear, that is when you'll realize your true divinity.
because means of perception are perception itself. So when we embody those means of perception, when we embody those qualities, we become him. And becoming him is the only way to see him, understand him, realize him. Right? There is no other way to realize him because he's unlimited. Trying to understand him through any of the other limited means is not going to give us, we can get an indication of who he really is, but we will never get to know him really, who he fully is until we become him.
So it's like the battery of the torch is inside the torch, but we are looking outside. Right? As we light up, we still look for the source outside in the world, not realizing the battery is actually inside of us.
Right. So Bhagwanji says that once we focus on imbibing these qualities that have been enumerated in 7 to 11, that those qualities, imbibing of those qualities will give us the ability to distinguish between what belongs to field and what belongs to the farmer.
So just like a torch, right? Same example, I'll stretch it a little bit. For a torch to know that its real power comes from the battery, the torch will have to have means of perception, which is understanding physics, understanding reality, understanding some of those things till he realizes, the light doesn't come from the lens, the light doesn't come from here, it actually comes from the battery inside. And that's the same thing with us. Our means of perception are between 7 to 11. When we have that gyan, when we imbibe it, our true nature will reflect.
So, as I was saying, you are able to understand what is field and what is farmer. And once you understand that, once you really understand what belongs to field, what belongs to farmer, you will really understand extraordinarily well that actions truly only belong to nature, to insentient nature. When you truly believe that, understand it, not believe it, you understand it, you realize it, automatically now your focus will not remain any longer on the actions alone. And your focus will now go up to purpose only. Then you will start to operate at the level of only purpose and the bhav. That is why this is important. Until we don't start to imbibe these qualities, there wouldn't be that unshakable understanding. And so हम लोग बार बार slip करते रहेंगे नीचे और बार बार हम लोग उस judgment में जाते रहेंगे. We constantly stay mired in the space of actions and results. But as we start to imbibe these qualities, our focus will automatically start to shift towards purpose and bhav. Then we move our consciousness to that higher level. Okay. And once we understand this part and our focus goes to that higher level, we will also understand that because actions only belong to the nature and that they are only a result of the three gunas of the nature, right? We will realize Bhagwanji. We will realize who he really is. And once you realize him, you become him, and hence you become immortal. Because now you stop identifying yourself with the field. You can distinguish between the two clearly. Abhi kya hai? They are fused together. From our point of view, they are not really fused together, right? They are like this. They are like this. But seen from this vantage point, they seem one. You don't see that there is something separate behind this. You only see this hand and you think this is only one thing. What Gita is trying to tell you here is that understand, change your point of view. From a different vantage point, you start to see, oh, there are two different things. You only perceive it to be one, but they are two separate things. And once you understand that they are two separate things and you move your sense of self from this to this, then you acquire the characteristics of this, which is immortal, and hence you become immortal. Right now, what is happening is we view from here and you say, oh, I am this, and there is nothing else. There's only this, nothing else. Acquiring this knowledge gives us this vantage point. And once we know there are two separate things, then we move up to saying, I am this. That's what we are trying to do when we are trying to acquire chapter 13, the knowledge of that. And then how to really realize it? Abhi ye sab kuch humne pad liya. We are at an intellectually now we understand. How do I bring it to an unshakable faith of knowing? Is 7 to 11. Imbibe those qualities. That's it. That's your means of getting there.
On reading the analysis given by the Lord in this chapter, a question may arise in the mind as to how this realization is helpful in one's daily life and in one's performance of duties. A
This-
little
This is that question that you've asked several times. How does moksha help us, right?
Mhm.
This life. So this next part explains it.
A little reflection would show that realization with the eye of true perception spoken of in this shloka refers to an unshakable faith in the means of true perception recounted from shloka 7 to shloka 11 of this chapter. Along with faith in the efficacy of these qualities, it is necessary to be convinced beyond all doubt that the real aim of human life is to imbibe these qualities. By imbibing them, complete freedom is obtained from the delusory and false worldly values and also from the tensions and problems of the world. Steadily, the sense of egocentric doership in actions and narrow selfishness of the mind is transformed into the experiencing of the Lord, manifest in diverse forms. Progressing in the path of this refinement of the mind attracts the Lord's infinite kindness, which removes all difficulties. It may perhaps be almost impossible for a human being to imbibe these qualities of true perception by own efforts. But the Lord's kindness makes the manifestation of these qualities possible in a short period of time. Attainment of peace of mind is not possible so long as worldly values are adhered to. Due to these value systems, the objects of comforts and conveniences are frequently mistaken as the means of ultimate happiness. These objects may provide physical comforts, but they utterly fail to provide peace and happiness, which can be attained only by an unshakable mental equipoise born of the light of self realization. This illumination dispels the darkness of ignorance and leads to the attainment of the supreme state, which is the abode of supreme eternal bliss.
So few things, right? We kind of know the second half, the ending, to be true. That our happiness doesn't come from worldly objects. They may make us in a temporary period give us pleasure, sense of pleasure. But as that pleasure fades and wanes, there is emptiness inside of us and we look for it again. So we go on acquiring, we go on looking for things, right?
It's
It
like
does not
bed
give,
and acquiring a very comfortable bed does not mean that you will also be bestowed with a sound sleep. You can get the best bed in the world and yet have the most difficult and like you're unable to sleep.
so the biggest fallacy in in uh in the world right now is the pursuit of happiness. That is the biggest cause of sukh. It's the biggest cause of unhappiness because you're constantly pursuing happiness. And the moment you attain it, like even if you watch that movie, right? Like that Will Smith movie, which was very popular, he says it in the movie itself in the end. He's like, this little moment when I got my job confirmation was happy. That's it. Then it was back to rigmarole of trying to find happiness again. Because you're looking for happiness outside. Now, if you come back to this entire section, right? A little reflection would show that the realization of with the eye of true perception spoken in the shloka refers to the unshakable faith. So the first thing we need is belief,
Unshakable.
faith that these principles, the means of true perception, works. Okay, honey, can I see it later after class? Thank you. Yeah. And for us to have unshakable faith, there is another prerequisite that the aim of human life is to imbibe these qualities. Till you focus your aim of human life on acquiring worldly pleasures or goals, egocentric goals, till you focus your aim on your man-made goals, ideas, identities of career, etc. Till you're focusing on that, you don't have unshakable faith on these qualities. And this is the point where all of us are stuck at. We want these qualities, but we also want the worldly validation. We want these qualities, but we also want bigger car, bigger house, more salary, promotions, our children to do well, all of those things.
Because
I
you
want-
hold on
I
to
want-
false worldly values.
I want my child to go into Ivy League school, but I also want to imbibe these qualities. What Bhagwanji is saying, no, you imbibe these qualities with unshakable faith. When you start doing that, everything in this world, all the difficulties will disappear.
Not at the physical level. Dharma or following your dharma does not mean that your life will become easy, and it definitely does not promise prosperity, physical, material prosperity. It never has. Dharma is neither opposed to material prosperity, nor nor it promotes it. Okay, but it definitely promises mental peace and happiness.
So what it would, so let's continue reading, right? So you have faith to imbibe these qualities. After you imbibe these qualities, you attain freedom from falsely world values and tensions and problems with the world, because you stop identifying with it.
Yes.
You stop identifying with your body. You stop identifying with your identity of being a father or a husband or whatever. Everything that happens, VVGP, is a lesson or a blessing.
Yeah, so it does not mean that you will get that bungalow or that house that you were craving for, or you will get that car that you were craving for because you are now following the dharma or that you imbibe these qualities. That does not happen. The fact that you want that house or you're craving for a car or any such thing, these happen because we are attached to certain worldly values. What will happen is that those worldly values itself will drop away because they are illusory. They are there because we have nothing real to hold on to. And they are the very cause of all our sufferings. So those worldly values will drop away. You no longer crave for those petty things in life. Just like a child stops craving for those small toy cars, right? They do not give him that happiness anymore once he's found a real car. So that way, this imbibing these qualities gives you happiness in a real sense. It gives you freedom from suffering in a real sense. So you no longer crave for those temporary petty pleasures any longer. Because you've reached a much higher level of happiness.
So by imbibing them, you you go by imbibing them, complete freedom is obtained from all these falsely world values, right? How do we implement this? VVGP. Everything that is coming to us is a blessing. Everything that is given to us is his wish, and it's our us to be grateful. If he wishes for us to have a bigger house because that will help us in our journey, then wonderful. If he thinks getting a bigger house can be a slippery slope for our ego, then he's protecting us. That is also wonderful. And the next step is when we start dissociating with the VVGP, and we start bringing this wall of gratefulness because of means of perception, our egocentric nature starts becoming quieter. We stop associating ourselves with the results. And in replacement of that, we just start seeing Bhagwanji's kindness everywhere for us. Everything that doesn't happen, we see it as a protection layer for us. Everything that does happen, we see it as a way that he's moving us in the right direction to come back home. Right? But all of this again, comes back to a full circle. It is almost impossible for a human being to imbibe these qualities by own effort without his kindness. Comes back to faith and bhakti. Yeah. This is why faith and bhakti is so important. Faith and bhakti, imagine when you're cooking, right, in a frying pan. Without that layer of oil, everything will stick onto that pan. Bhakti is that layer of oil. It starts with bhakti, it ends with bhakti, and all our actions are within. And that's the layer of oil, so that all our actions don't stick to the pan.
Questions? Close the chapter. So if no more questions, then we'll close the chapter and then we'll start the next chapter. Om Tatsaditi Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjun Samvade Kshetra Kshetragya Vibhaga Yogo Nam Trayodasho Adhyayah Hari Om Tatsat Hari Om Tatsat Hari Om Tatsat.
Okay, so we'll announce it in the WhatsApp group as well, but we will do quiz for this chapter in 2 classes from now, 2 weeks from now. So I'll put the date of that Sunday and I'll put it in the group as well, along with the reading roster for the shlokas.
So now we'll start chapter 14. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha Ath Chaturdasho Adhyayah. Smita, will you read with us? You are on mute, Smita.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Introduction. Frequent mention has been made so far about the. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Read
The Gunatraya Vibhag Yoga, the yoga of classification of the Gun Triad, I don't know, it's triad, right? Introduction. Frequent mention has been made so far about the 3 gunas of nature. It has also been said earlier that the diverse forms of creation are the results of action and interaction of these 3 gunas of nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Also in Shlok 21 of chapter 13, it was said that the propitious or the unpropitious forms of creation are the result of the association of the individualized self with these gunas. In this chapter, the Lord would describe in detail the characteristics of these 3 gunas, how they interact with each other, and what their effect is on human beings and other forms of creation. Therefore, this chapter has been named the Yoga of Classification of the Guna Triad. Should I go ahead? Connection. The importance.
We'll put you on mute, Smita. Otherwise so the first thing to note, we're on chapter 14. Every single chapter, जो भी title है उसका, it always ends with a yog. And it is important to note this, right? Whether you are in a Vishad, state of Vishad, the first chapter, whether you're trying to do any kind of karma, whether you are trying to understand any concept, everything has to go back to the purpose of life. Any activity that we do, every activity is a Rajasic activity. which is what we will learn about in this chapter. The purpose of that activity becomes supremely important. If the purpose is yoga, then everything is nice, right? It is the end goal because it leads us to the right thing. Any and everything can lead us to yoga. Every opportunity, every VVGP, everything that you can think of can be a portal to be one with him. So there is nothing right, there is nothing wrong. There is no emotion that is, oh, this is a good emotion to have, this is a bad emotion to have. I should only feel happiness. I should only feel grateful. If I'm feeling angry or jealous or upset, oh, these are bad emotions to have. I shouldn't have them. So I will pretend that I don't have them, or I will suppress them. Or, oh, this situation is favorable, so it's good. Or this situation is not favorable to me, so it's not good. Everything good, bad, perceived in any way, or however it makes us feel, is an opportunity to do yoga. And that is a key thing to remember. Every chapter name, whatever we are doing through this entire thing, is a form of yoga. So now we are dwelling into an inquiry into the gunas. Even that, the purpose for that is what? Yoga. The purpose is not to acquire mastery of the three gunas, acquire a mastery of the nature, to acquire some siddhis that will then end of the day benefit me and propel my ego further. That is the Ravan Buddhi. Okay, that is not the purpose. The purpose is what? Yoga. Okay, that is just one of those things to keep in mind and like should be always in the background. And it is in that with that backdrop that we do every activity. That makes it sattvic, that makes it a portal of achieving him.
So, few things to understand. One, what is, so we talked about the capital S self and the body, the field and the farmer in the previous chapter, right? What holds the two together? Gunas. Sorry, Kavita, you were saying.
I said it is our belief. It is our we that we assume that we are the
Correct.
body.
That's our
So,
associate.
so you're absolutely right. It is our belief that causes us to believe that those two are same. Okay. Now, in this chapter, what Bhagwanji will explain to us is, and what Abhinav is trying to bring out is, what causes us to believe this in the first place? Now we've understood it's a belief, but why do we have that belief? The belief exists because of the illusory power of the three gunas. The three gunas come together to create that illusion in our mind that tells us that they are together. So in this chapter, we will learn that what makes these two things stick together in an apparent fashion, what causes us to believe this is these three gunas. Okay, so now we know, okay, this is the glue that seemingly puts these two things together. So what will help us unglue them? What will help us change our perception from here to here is understanding what puts them together, which is these three gunas. That's why after that 13th chapter, the appropriate thing to do is this 14th chapter where we get into the inquiry of this glue, inquiry of the three gunas. Once we understand these three gunas correctly, we will be able to shift our focus from here to here and then unglue them. And then say this is separate from me and this is the real. That's why this is the next logical step. So there are three gunas, right? Sat, Raj, and Tam. Tam is that which is stationary, has inertia. Raj is what causes movement. Raj is dynamism. Tam is inertia, that which causes things to stop. Raj is dynamism, that which causes things to move, to flow. And Sat is that which illumines everything that Raj and Tam do or don't do.
So guna in its basic nature, Sat, Raj, and Tam, and the way to understand it is they are basically three strands in a thread that are intertwined, right? And they seep through every element of the world, but not the material world, not the gross world, the subtle world.
Also the gross.
It's in the mental construct.
Let's read the connection and move on.
I think gunas are such an important part of us, right? And we have no choice over that. A person is born dynamic, a person is born very lethargic. Then for them to attain something which is beyond their nature is even more difficult. Like, it's very at a gross level, it's very easy to say somebody is very lazy, somebody is this, and it's very easy to appreciate somebody who's very dynamic, but they haven't done much for that. It is how they were, and things are easier that way. I mean, just putting things in context, that then they have to, the task that they have to do is even more difficult for a person who is born with inertia, right? Or a bone of laziness in them to not go ahead and do things. I'm talking at the gross level, and I think it also comes in many other levels. Permeates in many other levels too.
So, guna manifestation, we will read in detail in the chapter how it manifests in every aspect of our life experience. But let's be really clear, we can have a lot of control over what guna is in the driver's seat for ourselves, because that exists at the bhav level.
And also the guna that, like, what you're saying, Smita, at the gross level, ki yaar, somebody is lazy, somebody has got more dynamism, somebody is constantly in action, or any of those characteristics that we'll go through. Those characteristics inside of us reside in our, and we'll talk about it in the next couple of shlokas. There's a causal body, then there is a causal body, then there is a subtle body, and then there is a gross body. Okay? Everything starts from the causal body. From causal body, we create the subtle body. From subtle body gets created the gross body. Okay? All these things that you're saying, these are things that we have manifested through our own actions, through our own behavior. So we can't say that, oh, I'm born like this or this person's born like that, and hence, yeah, you are absolutely right in saying that certain people are born with certain characteristics
Tendencies.
or certain tendencies or certain ways of being, right? Which is exactly a manifestation of our own prarabdha through our own actions, through our own choices on a constant basis over a long period of time. Some of those things are things that get manifested over a short period of time. Anything that gets manifested over a short period of time with a little amount of effort is easier to change. And something that gets manifested over a very long period of time through a lot of constant store of action, of course, to be able to change that, you will require an equivalent amount of extra work. Correct? Right? Like, it's like you've taken a little bit of snow to pull together a small snowball, right? Versus being able to create a very large snowball, or to create a very large snowman. So the amount of effort, the amount of warmth, the amount of tap that is required to क्या कहते हैं, piglify a small snowball versus a large snowman are going to be different, right? So the effort required, the tap required to change a certain habit is commensurate with the effort it took to pull it together in the first place.
So let me add here. We also have to look at this chapter from what Tuina said earlier, is the purpose is for yoga, It's for connecting with Bhagwanji. So it's very easy, and this would be a tendency for all of us to do, is to judge Sattva is good, Rajas is okay, and Tamagun is bad. That's how we typically see gunas. What Bhagwanji is saying, no, all three are the fabric with which everything is created.
So everything is
Everything-
important.
So all of them have its own purpose.
Yeah.
If you are born with a particular tendency, if you use it with the right purpose, it will be for your ultimate benefit. The point is you don't identify with it. Right? So, for example, you could be a person like Tamagun, right? We all need Tamagun in us to be able to have deep sleep, to be able to be fresh in the morning, to do our duty. If you don't have that, you will walk around like a zombie. Right? We all need that Rajasic dynamism because we all run a grahast, we all are living in grahast
To be able to do
to be
any
able to
activity.
do our duty.
To
But
even
can
breathe. That factor of that action of breathing is a Rajasic activity. It is Rajas that causes us to breathe. It is Rajas that allows water to flow.
so for example,
Friction that is there in the world. Friction allows you to stop certain things, right? Friction is a tamuguni, is tamgun, which is manifested.
so like let's give an example of a Rajasic activity like eating. If you eat simple light food, right? That's a Rajasic activity of actually eating. But if you eat simple light food that allows you to be full of energy to be able to do duty, you've made an activity so that your Satagun comes in the driver's seat. That same thing, if you eat fried food, unhealthy food, you feel lethargic after that, that same Rajasic activity now has become a Tamaguni activity. Right? Because you've now created more of those tendencies. So again, we'll go through a lot of examples and we'll understand it better.
Yeah. So essentially, yeah, the most important thing to remember is there are three gunas that create this world: Raj, Sat, Raj, and Tam. All three are important, as we will see. You can't have the world with only two or with only one. You need all three to create. And all three of them come together in multitudes of different proportions to create various modifications.
I mean, the 8 billion people being a starting.
So
So
every
I just, how do you define Satagun? Like, is it, you said illuminates Rajas and Tamas, right? That is what Satagun is?
Sat is the property of Sat is illumination. The property of Raj is dynamism. And the property of Tam is inertia. Now, how it manifests is in myriads of ways, billions of ways, billions and billions of ways. Sat manifests itself differently in bhav, it manifests differently in food, it manifests differently in music, it manifests differently in actions, it manifests itself in various forms. And that is one thing that we will go deeper into so that we can start to recognize Sat, Raj, and Tam in various things. Important to not associate or attach judgment to any of them. All of them bind, all of them, we need to leave all of them behind for us to reach Bhagwanji. Okay, so let's go through the chapter to understand each of these things that we are saying in deeper detail. We'll have shlokas to talk through every single thing we've touched upon thus far, right? But always remember, in anything and everything we read, judgment comes from ego. Without ego, there is no judgment. Awareness does not judge. Awareness only illumines. Awareness brings or creates a space for Bhagwanji to exist in our life. So every time when you're doing your own swadhyaya also, if you find that you are doing some kind of self-reflection, and it is creating a feeling of dissatisfaction, or is creating a feeling of like, I am not good enough. Why did I do this? It is making you feel bad. It is making you feel terrible. Know that we are no longer in a space of awareness. We are in a space of judgment. So it's your ego speaking. Your ego is trying to make you feel terrible, because that's the job of ego, to survive itself. And we have to move away from it always. So every time there's any kind of judgment that comes into factor while you're reading, understanding something, or for your own swadhyay, then you know that you're operating at the level of ego. Awareness only illumines. Awareness only shows us things. It does not create judgments. So we have to always try and stay in the space of awareness. When we are reading something, when we are acquiring something, when we are even reading our own selves through Swadhyaya. We'll start with the first shloka. Let's go back to Kavita. You want to read?
The importance of the knowledge about the three gunas is emphasized by the Lord. Thus,
Shri Bhagavan
Shri Bhagavan
Param Bhuya Pravakshyami
Param Bhuya Pravakshyami
Jnananya Jnananam Jnanamuttamam
Jnananam Jnanamuttamam
Yat Jnatva Munaya Sarve
Yat Jnatva Munayas Sarve
Param Siddhim Mita Kataha
Param Siddhi Mito Kataha
Param Siddhim Ita Kataha.
Param Siddhi Itam Kataha. The Lord said, I shall reveal to you once again the supreme knowledge, the best among all knowledges, by acquiring which all sages have attained supreme perfection after this life. Knowledge of Guna Triad, the supreme knowledge. In this shloka, the Lord made two assertions. Firstly, he regards the knowledge of the three gunas to be the supreme knowledge. Secondly, he asserts that with the help of this knowledge, all the sages attain supreme perfection after the departure from the world. The reason is that at the root of all creation lies primal nature, which is the Lord's divine power called Maya or cosmic delusion. The primal nature is the hidden seed from which all the creation is brought forth. The nature is constituted of three gunas in the same manner as a string is constituted of three strands of different colors. These strands are not just parts of the string. The strands alone comprise the string, and there is nothing in the string other than them. Similarly, these three gunas not only exist in nature, but it is they which together constitute nature. These gunas are not material components, but are the attributes of basal and elemental character. Activated by the power of the self, the three gunas interact and give rise to the successful modification of nature. The first modification of nature is called determinative faculty at the cosmic level, and the intellect at the individual level. The second modification is in the form of the distinctive faculty at the cosmic level and ego at the individual level. It is at this stage the three gunas manifest themselves and create further modification like the mind or the contemplative faculty. The five senses of perception, five senses of action, the five subtle elements, and five gross evolutes, which comprise the physical entities. Knowledge of the three gunas of nature gives complete control over the knowledge of nature and its modification, and hence the Lord called it supreme knowledge.
So two assertions here. One, he's saying, once you understand these three gunas really well, it is that this knowledge itself is the supreme knowledge. Why is this knowledge the supreme knowledge? If we connect it back to last chapter, it is because these three gunas are the ones that create the illusion which confuses the jivatma to believe that it is this body, mind, intellect complex. It causes that confusion, that chaos, and because of which it assumes a, a mortal coil, right? So having this knowledge allows you to unglue the two and allows the jivatma to really understand that it is Bhagwanji himself. It's not separate from Bhagwanji, that it is an ansh of Bhagwanji. Just like a wave is an ansh of the ocean. That realization only happens when we are able to unglue it, and that ungluing happens by the removal of the ignorance. And that removal of ignorance happens by getting the knowledge of the three gunas. Really, really understanding what these three gunas are, what their modifications are, and how they affect us and they affect all the things in the world. The second thing he says that once you have acquired this knowledge, all sages have attained supreme perfection. Why? Because of the very fact that you've unglued and you've got this knowledge, now you understand. You don't have this view anymore, you have this view. So you become this. Once you understand it, you become him. Right? So that's how. So this is the assertion that Bhagwanji is making in this chapter. And then he goes on to say that at the very root of all creation, there is, for everything, there is a causal seed. So Bhagwanji's power is Maya. And that Maya is unmanifest Maya. Okay, that is called the primordial energy. The primordial unmanifest energy is the root cause of all creation. So Bhagwanji hai, Bhagwanji ki energy hai, which is not really distinct from him. Okay, this primordial energy, the Devi, there are different words for the same concept. Okay, so that energy has this energy is composed of the three gunas in their unmanifest form. The primordial energy is unmanifest. The three gunas are unmanifest within this, and these three gunas are like three strings that wind together to create one particular string. If you open up those three strands, the string stops to exist. Right? It isn't as if the three strands that comprise a string, that string does not exist outside of those three strands. Right? If you take the three strands away, it isn't as if the string will still continue to exist. If the string said that this string includes the three gunas, if you said that there are three strands that are part of the string, you can take those three strands out and yet some component, some part of that string so in some form will exist, right? What we are saying here is that no, there is nothing else about that string but those three strands. There is no fourth component to it. Three strands, you pull them together, it creates a string. In the same way, this nature is comprised of three gunas and them alone. There is no fourth component to this insentient nature and all its modifications. Every creature, everything, jisko bhi hum it karke bolte, idam, everything that you can point to in this world is composed of only three basic components. These are these three gunas, nothing else. If you take them out, this entire nature disappears. Okay, that is very important to understand. The basis of everything is these three gunas. Okay, then what happens? Okay, then what happens is that, so at the very beginning, these three gunas are unmanifest as a primordial energy. Then Bhagwanji activates those three gunas. At the very first step, when those three gunas get activated, they form the determinative faculty. In an individualized form, it is called the intellect, which is why when you look at the basis, right, on top is the self, which is unconnected to the three gunas, which lie below them. Below the three gunas, the first thing is the intellect. That's the first thing that is formed. Intellect is the determinative faculty. The faculty that determines what is real, what is unreal, what is right, what is wrong, what I should do, what I should not do, what is dharma, what is not dharma, what is my duty, what is not my duty. Okay? This determinative faculty is the first thing that is formed and is the closest to Bhagwanji, which is why, and when it is activated by this thing, we always think when we are in a state of delusion, we think this thinking capacity of ours is Bhagwanji. Right? We think I am this power of thinking. I am because I think. Right? And we had said this in the previous chapters that intellect is the thing that is the closest to Bhagwanji in its composition. That is why to give that example of iron and magnet, when magnet of self comes close to the intellect iron, the iron aligns itself. All the components, ions in the iron align themselves so that the iron itself starts acting like it is magnet. And then if you put smaller pieces of iron against that magnetized iron piece, it will attract those iron pieces to it as if it were magnet itself. Right? But actually that iron piece is just a piece of iron, not magnet. What is important to understand is that that magnet can magnetize only iron because it has the right composition. It cannot magnetize copper. It cannot magnetize brass. It can only magnetize iron because it has the right component to it. So similarly, of all the things, all the modifications in the nature that are formed by the three gunas of nature, intellect is the first thing and is the only thing that has the right composition to it so that it can be magnetized, it can be illumined directly by the self. That is why intellect must always be in charge, not mind, not chitta, not anything else. Intellect should be in charge. And where intellect faces, whether it faces towards the God and is taking its direction from the God, whether it is, or it is facing mind, determines our fate. Whether it is Gandhari Buddhi or whether it is Sanjay Buddhi.
Okay. So I think like Tuna mentioned, right? The first is that the three strands cover up everything, and in different proportion, these three strands give rise to the different personalities that exist at the subtle level of everything that we see. The second and the very important element is to understand the first modification of nature is called the determinative faculty at the cosmic level and intellect at the individual level, right? Now, and the second modification is ego at the individual level. Now, this is also why both of these elements we have to be very careful about. Ego is what we identify with deeply. And that we know now is to be it is a modification of the guna. Bhagwan ji ka jo maya hai, his maya that he's created, we cannot escape that maya without him. Which is why we say Gita can never be an intellectual exercise. If you use these principles at an intellectual level, you are only furthering the first modification of guna, which will only take you to ego. This is where you have to be very careful. It is always about implementing onto yourself for you to be aware and build more awareness about your own story and your own experience and the bhav with which you do things, which we'll cover more later.
So we have the first determinative faculty, the intellect. After that, the ego gets formed. The second faculty, right? The second modification. And once ego comes into picture, ego is what is the distinctive faculty, right? What creates different things, which creates difference. It's like one of those, those initial cells, what are they called? The stem cells. Once they start to distinguish themselves into like, now I am the cell for the epithelial cell, I am like the coronary cell, I'm the blood cell, right? So it is at this stage that your distinctive faculty comes in to create distinctive ability to perform specialized functions. So distinctive faculty, which is the ego, comes into play. And at this stage, the three gunas start to manifest themselves after ego. So the third thing that they manifest is the mind. And once the mind is pulled together, then all other 20 forms come together. The 5 means of perception, the 5 means of action, the 5 subtle forms of evolution, and the 5 gross forms of evolution. That is how the 3 gunas come together to create the 23 components of the Prakriti, Chakra. Right? If you really understand these 3 gunas extremely well, you get the knowledge to control entire nature. That is the assertion of Bhagwanji. But again, remember, what is the purpose of acquiring this knowledge? The purpose is not to acquire control over nature. It is to create, even if you acquire that, you will acquire control over nature by understanding this. But to what end? The end purpose is to connect to Bhagwanji. It does not end. The purpose doesn't end at the time of acquiring knowledge and thus acquiring control over nature. And this is the supreme knowledge. This is how gunas start to operate. From next class onwards, we will go deeper into understanding the gunas, and then we will get into specifics of how these gunas manifest themselves and how those other myriad of manifestations happen in this video. Okay, so yeah, just like, okay, I'll take that in the next class. I'll take that in the next class.
Yeah, there is a small paragraph still remaining in the first shloka itself, the attainment of perfection.
Yeah, please.
Let me read that.
Please.
Attainment of perfection. Knowledge of the guna triad leads contemplative sages to conclude that all phenomena of nature are merely a play of 3 gunas, and their effect on the human being is restricted to the field of intellectual, emotional, and physical existence only. The basic character of a human being is divinity itself. So when this principle is imbibed firmly, the individualized self is convinced of its identity being distinct from the play of 3 gunas, enabling it to keep them under its effective control and to use them for self-realization.
So because gunas, the very first manifestation of gunas is intellect, and then everything else, right? So Bhagwanji is telling us that once you understand this, you understand that any kind of play that gunas can have, they can only affect you at a physical level or an emotional level or at an intellectual level. It does not affect you, the self. Cannot affect you, the self. That is why we are able to say that it does not matter what you do or don't do, or what role you have or you don't have. Everything, nothing here, nothing can sully the self. Nothing can affect the self. all actions are part of this nature. They are all part of the three gunas. And three gunas ki reach nahi hai beyond intellect. There is no reach they have. That is why the self remains unaffected by anything that these gunas do. Just like the example Abhinav gave, that when you switch on a torch, that light can affect everything outside of it. It cannot affect anything that is inside of it. It cannot affect anything that is behind that bulb. That is unaffected by the light of that torch. So our self, the capital S self and the Jivatma is behind the three gunas. So any modification, any action, any interaction, any result that comes out of the three gunas and their interplay cannot affect the self. Make sense?
I have a question here.
Hmm.
You know, the previous paragraph, if the first modification of nature is called the determinative faculty at the cosmic level. So cosmic level, in an individual level, it becomes the intellect. But cosmic level, what is the determinative faculty? Whether it is according to the karmas, what is the kind of the birth we take, something like that, or
No. So in this world, everything, there is always a framework, right? There's a framework that is created. And so when you want to create when you want to create anything, you basically create a model of that first, right? If you were trying to create something in the factory, for example, or if you go to a dentist, let's get closer home. You go to a dentist and he needs to create a new teeth for you, a new tooth that needs to be implanted. He's going to create a model of that tooth. He will create a model of your jaw, right? And from that model, you actually create a basic thing. Or you go to any engineering world, right? You're trying to create a bridge. They will first create a blueprint of that bridge, right? A blueprint of the bridge is created. You create a building, a blueprint of the building is created first. And then that blueprint then then you create a more like model of that building or that bridge. And then you actually go and build that bridge. There are steps to everything, right? So, and even before you create the blueprint, there is so there are different levels, right? So the first level in this world is called, wait, there is something called the causal body. In the example of a bridge, the causal body would be the knowledge of all the science and physical principles. Okay? From that causal body, you create a subtle body. The subtle body is going to be like a blueprint you create for bridge. Okay? And then that blueprint then gets converted into a gross body. You actually create a physical bridge, right? So everything that exists in this world, there is going to be a blueprint for it. A blueprint for a human being, a blueprint for a duck, a blueprint for a panda, a blueprint for a flower, a blueprint for a tree. With that blueprint then comes the actual gross form. And each human being, even though the blueprint is conceptually the same, the actual gross form is going to be different for all of us, right? So the concept of us and all our forms is also at that subtler level and at a cosmic level, right? So there is a cosmic intelligence that exists in this world. And that cosmic intelligence is the determinative faculty in this world. There's a cosmic intelligence that underlies. From that cosmic intelligence, a part of that intellect gets solidified in the form of our individualized intellect. And when we are able to really meditate and go beyond our physical limitations, we are able to connect into the cosmic intelligence. So there is an underlying cosmic intelligence. And this is just my intelligence, is just one small part of that thing that got converted into a gross form.
Okay.
Make sense? Right?
this kind of, the prana, which, we can say, the cosmic intelligence. And how do you explain ego then? Like ego, the cosmic level, at the cosmic level.
It is the distinctive faculty. Bhagwanji created a concept
So can I,
of saying that there is going to be distinction between
so
things,
can I,
right? The blueprint of that concept is called the distinctive faculty. That there is something called distinction. That distinction will get created because I've created a concept of distinctive faculty,
so
right? It's at a very abstract level,
can I
right?
try?
Yeah.
So both of these elements, right? What is the purpose? So let's look at it at individual level. What is the purpose of ego? The only purpose of ego is for us to be distinct from each other. If we didn't have ego, we would all merge into one. I wouldn't be able to differentiate myself from Tuina and myself. And at an even more subtle level, I would not be able to distinguish my hand from the couch. It will all merge. So that distinctive faculty allows us to operate with different objects and different beings. And that is the purpose of why ego exists in the guna in our individual self. Similarly, the the determinative faculty, the intellect, right? As Tuvina explained, that is the blueprint, but that is what is allowed us to understand the purpose of every single thing with which we are interacting with. Every single VVGP has a part of guna, which is a determinative faculty, which we have to identify using our intellect for what its purpose is. Everything happens with purpose. God does not play dice with the universe. And that's the way it is designed. When it at an individual level, it is our intellect with which we choose what purpose with which we interact with the VVGP. And at the ego level, it is for us to know, hey, while we're all distinct and I have to do my duty, we're all actually one.
Thank
Like
you.
when the baby is born, right, it does not have a well-developed ego. So when the baby is born, it associates itself with the mother, does not know that it is distinct from the mother. So if mama is laughing, the baby will laugh. If the mummy is showing signs of anxiety and stress, baby will reflect those emotions. That's because the baby does not know it is distinct from the mom. The ego is not well developed. So it merges with the mom and it constantly reflects her. As the baby's ego develops, it starts to have its own identity and its own ability to function in the world. That is what Abhinav was explaining very clearly, that that's the purpose of ego. But like if you're asking why, what do you mean by what is it at the cosmic level? Basically, it's the blueprints. They're the blueprints that you create a concept, you create a term, you create a
Just try to understand his purpose. Everything happens with purpose at a determined
she's
level.
asking a different question.
You're making me to conclude.
All right. So we'll stop the class here.
Thank you.
We'll do the takeaways, please.
Um, in the 13th chapter, which we learned again that about bhav, that using the means of perception, we have to move our consciousness to purpose and bhav. That thing I will implement those things. I'll go again through those shlokas 7 to 11 to and also prepare for the quiz because we'll have to go through that shlokas again. So I'll go through those shlokas again and understand. So that is one thing, and it's kind of now clear to me what we talked about, the difference between the self and our subtle body, cross body, like what's the difference and how is the self not involved? I have kind of understood now. And yeah, regarding the gunas, it was a good start, as in the first shloka itself is like a heavy one where a lot of knowledge itself is given. I don't know what will be there in the next shlokas, but yeah, it was clear as of now. We'll try to understand more that how how to, as in how to get ahead of these three gunas. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, shall I go next? This is the my practice point is to consciously practice this, the means of perception and 24/7, and also like the bhakti, what Abhinav was mentioning as a layer of oil. So without the Bhagwanji's grace and bhakti, it's not we cannot acquire everything on our own. So that to develop that bhakti and to know every action need to that yoga. So that is the concept, and I had to keep in mind, and also to practice that awareness. Awareness, as you mentioned, it's like it eliminates, but judgment, it comes from ego. So every action we have to see whether it is coming out of the ego or with awareness. So that is my takeaway.
I think between both the chapters and the end of chapter 13 and beginning of chapter 14, what I might key takeaway is again going back to the same thing where we have little control over a lot of things, like the way we are born, the prarabdha that we have been given, the karmas, the accumulated negative or positive karmas with which we are going to be leading this life. The only control that we can have is on the bhav. That's the only control we can exercise. uh it's, I mean, that will kind of distinct, because there are a couple of things around it, right? With bhav, in bhav, one doesn't want to create a negative bhav, because these ego, anger, everything can come, these are negative qualities, and which is an expression of how you feel. But in bhav, you're generally correct, like that's what you have to be. None of us are that malicious that at the bhav level we want to really go ahead and hurt and cause problem, but our expressions are very different. So bhav, we can try and focus only on that how to express, because the other things, again, like in my dealings in my day-to-day life with my kids, with my everybody, with the best intentions, your expressions are not the same, so it's not understood in the same manner that you're trying to express, right? So at least it gives you a satisfaction that the bhav that with which I have said is correct, and that's the only control I have, because controlling every single element of your life is going to be very difficult. So if we can just focus on one thing, that VVGPs will come as per our situation, our nature will be there as we are born, but then this is something that we can try and have a little control over. Again, sometimes I doubt that do we have that much control over the bhav as well, because again, that is also a combination of us, right? That but as I also feel bhav cannot be very negative for most of us. So then, we can try and operate from that for ourselves only, not for anyone else, but can be a little more clearer when we do any of our actions. Yeah.
Excellent takeaways.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Should we do a closing shlokas? Should we do it, or does somebody want to volunteer?
I can do it.
Okay.
ॐ सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु, सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामया, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय, तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय, मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमद पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते, पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ ॐ ॐ
For the satsang.
Narayan.
Narayan. Have a lovely
Have a
day.
lovely day.
Naren.
Naren. Thank you, guys.